Hello, Internet, and welcome back to Dungeons and Dragons with Lightning God. This is the final of 3 sessions in the Curse of Knothburg one shot, so go watch the previous videos to get caught up on the story if you haven't already. I also wanted to make a correction to the lore in my first video. In the first session, I called the goddess of magic Mystria, but in Pathfinder, the D&D branch that we are playing, her name is Nethys. This will be important later in the session. Anyways, as we left off, Kylus and Pallas had freed an unknown creature from Harold Buttonwood's basement just as he was coming down to open the secret door. Also at the same time, the rest of our party burst in through the Buttonwood's front door, and Lavalley shouted, "Harold Buttonwood, you are under arrest!" It's at this point which we entered combat. In D&D, players, friendly NPCs, and enemies all roll initiative to see who is in which order in the turn-based system. I rolled a 19 and got to go first, while Buttonwood was second to last in the turn order, followed by the unknown creature. I was flying in the air and saw the basement door to the cellar and flew down through it. I'll be honest, I couldn't think of anything cool to say, so I yelled, "Hello, Buttonwood, you are under arrest again," as I cast blindness/deafness on him. The DM asked me if I wanted to blind him or make him deaf, and obviously I chose to blind him. In most D&D games, most spells require a person to see a target, so I effectively made it impossible for Buttonwood to defend himself. Purple lightning shot from my hands and struck Buttonwood's eyes, turning them white as he turned around to look at me and cried out in surprise. Immediately, I flew out of the room in case Buttonwood had some trick up his sleeve because my HP was, as a witch, was very low compared to the others. I told them Buttonwood was blinded as I flew past them. From there, it was totally one-sided. First, Enya shot him in the leg with a longbow. Then Donovan shot him in the other knee with a light crossbow. Then Pallas came out from the secret door and slashed him with her mace. Then Kylus slashed him again in the back with her sword. During this absolute carnage, Lavalley's player was saying we needed him alive and looked horrified when Shima's player said it's fine if he dies because she could revive him from near death. Finally, it was Lavalley's turn, and he came down the stairs halfway, jumped in midair, and shot Buttonwood with a Tanglefoot bag in order to pin him to the wall like a Spider-Man webbing, after Lavalley rolled a 19. This attack knocked Buttonwood out cold and ended combat as I let Revy in through the secret tunnel. This is when Pallas helps the hurt creature out from the back room, and our group frantically rolls to identify the creature as Kylus introduces their new friend as Jeremy. As it turns out, Jeremy was actually a magical abomination, a creature that should not exist called a Spellwrack. Spellwracks are born when a living thing spends too long near a source of wild magic and becomes corrupted. They are glitches in reality resulting from Nethys' death and disrupt and consume magic around them. They are incredibly hard to kill, and they can use seemingly random assortment of magical powers with no regard for the usual limits of spellcasting. However, when cut off from outside sources of magic, they become weak and confused, and Buttonwood had used anti-magic shackles to keep Jeremy prisoner. When we finally realized what this thing is, my character moved to the opposite side of the room as he was deathly afraid of wild magic. Shima sees Buttonwood's toad familiar crawling out from his sleeve and grabs it, and the toad is never talked about again for some reason. She then heals Buttonwood to 1 HP so he wakes up and we can question him. Enya and Lavalley begin the interrogation, and when they tell him they are kingfishers, he is disgusted, and we all look equally disgusted when he shows callous disregard for the crimes against humanity they confronted him with. My character finally gets over that there's a Spellwrack here and looks in the back room, seeing blood everywhere and the militia armor on the ground, and goes into a fury. Remember last session when Shima accused Constance of flesh warming, and my character told her it was heresy and a crime against humanity? Well, seeing as my character is basically a disciple of Pharasma, he takes it very personally and shouts, "How dare you!" at Buttonwood. Donovan grabs my character, but Xanon breaks free, and Lavalley steps in to further restrain me. My character pulls out his wand of Shocking Grasp, and I cast Shocking Grasp through my connection with Revy, who moved next to Buttonwood. Revy starts sparking with electricity, and as my character casts it, Enya grabs Revy, taking all the damage from the attack, which thankfully was minimal. Lavalley slams my character into the wall next to Buttonwood and uses a tanglefoot bag on him, pinning him to the wall as well. Enya then walks over and slaps me with her whip. It's at this point that Shima used a calming spell that calmed our tempers and also healed us both. While that's happening, Kylus and Pallas question Buttonwood on where the missing militia and cattle are, and he chillingly says that we are too late and he has already won. Lavalley sent Donovan and Shima to get the town's militia captain, as he and the Enya questioned Buttonwood further. Enya used share memory to force Buttonwood to reveal his entire plan, and the DM described the following scenes. Enya saw Buttonwood capture Jeremy with dispel magic one night in the forest. Then her view changed to him stealing a sheep and cow. The sheep died in his first attempt, but the cow survived as he got better at flesh warping, and Enya was gagging as she described what Buttonwood was doing. It then showed Buttonwood capturing and flesh warping the militia soldiers in his basement, who he basically killed so they would be under his control. We then see Buttonwood and Constance in his living room, telling her that if she takes the vials of blackfinger salt that he made and goes to the enemy war camp, poisoning their food, they will be too sick and leave peacefully. It then cuts to a normal day in the life of Buttonwood, walking to the store when he overhears a few people gossiping about the rumors that the Kingfisher Company is coming to solve the disappearances. Buttonwood then chooses to explain his plan, which was to have these Spellwracks raid the enemy war camp to free his sons, while the rest of the prisoners and enemy soldiers would burn in hell for all he cared. When Enya mentions the blackfinger salt, my character said, "Hey, isn't that the stuff that Donovan took from Constance's drawer?" Buttonwood immediately breaks out of the memory control spell and exclaims, "What?" The DM explains that Constance knew nothing about the crimes against humanity that Buttonwood was doing, and was supposed to go to the enemy war camp as a healer and sabotage their food supplies. What she didn't know is that Buttonwood was going to raid the weakened camp with his Spellwracks and kill everyone but his sons. When Buttonwood heard about the Kingfishers coming, he had to move up his plans because he wanted more soldiers to convert. By taking the blackfinger salt, Donovan saved countless lives and disrupted Buttonwood's plans. We now knew that we had to stop the Spellwracks because retaliation from any damage they caused would fall directly onto Knothburg. Enya cut me down from the webbing, and as my character pulled the goop off himself, he slapped it over Buttonwood's mouth to get one hit in for his goddess. Donovan and Shima arrived with the captain, who was disgusted at Buttonwood's and told us she would personally make sure he never saw the light of day again. My character responded by saying, "If it makes you feel better, I permanently blinded him, so he won't be seeing any sort of light." She cleverly responded with, "Then neither will he feel the day's warmth." We filled in Donovan and Shima on the situation and immediately treated Jeremy's wounds, and Shima wanted to adopt him and bring him with us. It's at this point that our DM tells us that Jeremy was originally intended to be part of Buttonwood's boss fight, and we freaking befriended him instead. Not wanting to upset the literal boss monster, we had no choice but to let him come. My character, who is deathly afraid of Jeremy, asks Shima if he could ride alongside the cart on Butters, and she says yes if he could get on him. My character I rolled a 3 on my action, and as soon as my character got on Butters, he's bucked off. I wanted to try again, but Lavalley is just like, "Suck it up, dude." So now it's all of us in the cart, with Lavalley and Enya riding alongside on horseback. You heard me. It's all of us, with Shima sitting on Butters, sitting on Jeremy, for an unknown length of time in a small cart. Oh, boy. I chose to take the reins so I could be as far away from Jeremy as possible, and Pallas picked up the trail of the other Spellwracks and sits next to me. Along the way, Shima tells Jeremy to keep his hands to himself so he doesn't corrupt anybody's body. Just before dawn breaks, we get to the enemy roll camp and roll initiative, which I got third in the roll order. For some reason, the doors to the enemy war camp are shut and have no signs of forced entry, despite there being fighting taking place on the inside from the sounds of combat and smoke, something the DM didn't like me pointing out. Slide 70s, Enya used a magical masterpiece performance called the Minuet of Midnight Ivory to dance up the fortified walls of the camp and open the door from the other side. While she was doing that, Donovan opted to simply use a super jump to vault over Enya and the wall and throw a smoke bomb in front of the door so the rest of the Kingfishers would have the element of surprise. As the door swung open, we saw 5 enemy soldiers were already dead, leaving only 3 defending the gate, while the rest of them frantically gathered up their armaments, supplies, tents, and desperately loaded them onto wagons in order to flee the area before the Spellwracks could cause any more damage. Shima had chosen to stay in the cart with Jeremy for her turn, and Callus and Pallas told Jeremy to do whatever Shima said and asked him to protect Mama no matter what. As Jeremy roared in agreement, he meekly asked Shima if he could keep his hands to himself, which Shima stopped keeping his hands to himself, which Shima said yes. The others rushed in, splitting up into teams, taking out all 3 Rak militias and the Rak Cow simultaneously. My first action, however, was to fly in and do a perception check to see where the prisoners were being held, but I failed it, so I just used a lightning bolt on one of the militiamen, bringing him down to half health in one shot. The DM pointed to me and said, "We got a mobile artillery piece right here." Donovan and Lavalle teamed up on another spell rack, blades flashing and bow twanging to dominate the monstrosity. Meanwhile, Enya, still atop the wall, shot arrows into the same militiaman I attacked, killing him after a few rounds. Shima and Jeremy joined the fight after a conversation, attacking the other militia spell rack that hadn't been targeted yet. But Shima got very unlucky in her attack damage and missed all but one of her magic bow shots. Fortunately, Jeremy was protecting her and demolished one of the spell racks into single-digit hit points in just 2 hits. Pallas and Kylus teamed up with an enemy soldier on the racked cow, attacking it from multiple sides and exploiting every weakness they could find. With multiple sneak attacks from Pallas and much hacking and slashing from the dual-wielding Kylus, the cow was on very low hit points, but it nearly gored Kylus to death with its corrupted horns. I turned my attention to the racked cow and was like, yes, this is my moment to shine. I told the GM, I'm going to decapitate this cow. I used a stone discus to summon a sharp stone frisbee and launch it at the cow. Unfortunately, I rolled an 8 and wasn't high enough to hit the cow, missing it and embedding itself into the enemy soldier right next to Pallas, who was fighting alongside us for the time being. The DM said if he was a less merciful god, he would have made the attack hit Pallas. Considering my attack brought the enemy soldier down to 2 hit points, I was very grateful for his mercy, and that no one else in the battle saw where the discus came from. As Donovan killed the spell rack, he and Lavalle were fighting. Lavalle turned to the spell rack Jeremy had just finished pummeling and landed the killing blow with a crossbow bolt, yelling to Jeremy that he's got him. Jeremy then gave him 2 thumbs up with a goofy grin on his face, and my god, this boy is pure. Kylus put the cow down and ended combat as the enemy war camp commander walked up to us. Before we continue, after the session ended, the DM told us that the Spellwracks were constantly regenerating HP after each of our turns, which means we're doing more damage to them than they could heal back. Hot damn. Anyway, the DM asked us to roll charisma checks, and Enya rolled the highest. So still up on the wall, she gracefully leapt down and said, "As a reward for saving your lives, we request to take custody of your prisoners." The commander said that seemed fair and thanked us for our help. As we started to lead the prisoners out, Lavalle pointed toward Jeremy and said, "You see that? That's a spell rack. It causes warping of reality, and I wouldn't stick around here long if I were you." The commander went pale and exclaimed, "Men, we are packing up!" On the way back to Knothburg, Lavalle and my character found Ulrin's student who wrote the Forbidden Magic book. He was distraught when we told him what had happened with it, and he said he thought Ulrin would keep it safe. Nearby were 2 of Buttonwood's sons, who were equally bewildered, disgusted, and ashamed when they heard what their father had done. Buttonwood's 3rd son had died from an infection from a wound the enemy soldiers didn't let them treat. One of them, who was a medic, wished he could know if his brother was doing all right in the afterlife. I was overjoyed at this because, if you remember, I was robbed of my moment to commune with Pharasma before, and now I could. I told them about my connection to Pharasma, and they asked me to contact her and ask about their brother. When we got back to the town, there was a huge celebration, and we were hailed as heroes. In the middle of town square, I set up a ritual, and a whippoorwill bird flew into the magic circle and spoke in the goddess's voice, saying that their brother had made it safely to the afterlife and would be rewarded for his nobility and self-sacrifice. I was then praised as a prophet and carried around town, while Valley said, "I thought he was just joking about that power." And sadly, this is where this one-shot ends. The DM explained a few other details, like that had we not discovered Buttonwood was the culprit, he would still have failed in his attack, and even with the prisoners' soldiers, Knothburg would still be razed to the ground. So it's good that we weren't terrible at our job. Before this video ends, I'd like to thank Jacob, our glorious, brave, one true dungeon master god, for creating such an amazing campaign and helping with the scripts for these videos. I'd also like to thank all the other guys who played in the campaign, because it would not have been the same if even one of you wasn't there. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching these videos. I really enjoyed making them, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.